I just watched a video um, about this guy Marshall Rosenberg, and I guess he is a psychologist. I didn't really do any research into his background. I just heard the message he was giving about this method he calls nonviolent communication, and it's really designed to open up a dialogue with corporations and um, corporate executives and CEOs to make them aware of um, how the structures of their business might somehow be doing um, violence in an unseen way to the population that they're doing business amidst. Um, but his program really doesn't have to apply only to corporations. It applies to the way we perceive each other and the way we perceive the public, the discourse that we're supposed to be engaged in the public sphere, the way we speak to others and confront others. Um, he thinks that the way we do that needs to be altered because the way we're doing it now is implicitly violent, even though we may not consciously approach the world violently and others in a negative way. We've been raised to judge others. There's this distinction between self and other. And what is the other? Well, not me. And why are they not me? Because of this label and that label and all these bad words that we assign to them to distinguish them from us, from the good qualities that we have. And so then when we have this attitude set up before we even meet somebody, we've already labeled them. As soon as we see them, whether they're young or old or white or black or Spanish or smart or stupid, or we're always, as soon as we see somebody, we're typically projecting all these ideas onto somebody we don't even know. And it's that attitude of, I don't know you, therefore I must assume you are some way. That self and other distinction that really causes the breakdown of our ability to communicate with one another. And he used the word intentionality to describe what we need to do to solve this. And what that really intentionality is when you are conscious about something and you have attention directed at one very salient goal and or object or something you want to attain. And he wants us to direct that ability that we all have naturally. The way he phrased it was to ask what's alive in us and what would make the world more wonderful. And in other words, what's alive in us is, I interpret that as, that's just what is the basis of human experience. Not what is the basis of my experience. What is the basis of American experience, European experience, Iraqi experience. We're not asking that. That's too cluttered and specific and shaded and veiled by all these extra ideological projections onto experience. We have to get to the real root of human experience to communicate, to intersubject. So when we meet somebody new, when we engage someone in a dialogue, we have to be totally open to the possibilities of their personality. And being open to them just means being emptied of our own labels for ourself. Because only when the self lets go of its attachment to its own image does the image it's projecting onto the other fall away. Because they're both karmically connected. In other words, the self can't act without the other acting. They both function together. one of my favorite stories of Gautama Buddha's life is about when, right before he realized enlightenment and nirvana, he was confronted by this monster, Mara, and there's descriptions of it, what it was, like a flaming, oozing, bubbling monster that just wanted to eat him, eat Buddha alive, rip his head off, and torture him. And the last hurdle he had to pass through before enlightenment was this monster. And imagine he's having this rapturous experience, and he's facing this huge monster standing over him, and he's like, I have a sword and I have to slay Mara. And the story never really goes on to explain, did he slash the monster, or did he just recognize himself in Mara? In other words, did the self recognize the other and say, thou art that, or say, I am that which is in you, which is in me, which is in you, and the cause effect just never stops. There's a connection, and you can't assign the cause to either side. And so the Buddha realized enlightenment by recognizing himself, his shadow. He assimilated his shadow, if you want to put it into psychoanalytic terms. And I just did a post about whether or not YouTube is a rational public discourse. And that's Habermas's language, and he's a very rationally centered philosopher who really wants to try to redo the Enlightenment almost socially, because he thinks that the main Enlightenment project of bringing rational discourse to a free, open, public society, properly educated, is the way to be, And, I agree with that to a large extent, because that's what the world needs right now more than it needs some spiritual transformation necessarily. Because that spiritual transformation is only open to a smaller percentage of the society that is already, properly educated, able to engage in a rational discourse. People that are going to start worrying about a spiritual world have already had their say with the physical world, with the world of the senses, and the world of being true to your experience and being able to rationally debate your opinions and your ideas. That's a given if you're going to deal with spirituality, genuine spirituality. But what the world really needs now is just to get to this lower level of genuine, rational egoic consciousness, because a lot of the world isn't even there. And Habermas questions whether YouTube is at that level of rational discourse where it's still, you're centered in you have a voice as an ego. But I don't know what Habermas would say about this, but to have a voice as an ego that means something to others, you must also, for your own experiential sense of yourself, have transcended the ego. In other words, you've transcended the self-other distinction so that you can approach and communicate with others in an open, unfiltered way without any preconceived notions or stereotypes. And the question that I think is really urgent is to figure out if YouTube is the type of arena of communication where rational discourse can take place, where communication can take place between people about things that matter in the world right now. Because it's easy to say anything we can really do is local, but our local community is important, but the world right now needs to come together as a global society, a global mind, and YouTube might be able to do that.